All right, so good afternoon. My name is Janelle Scott. I am the Director of Policy and Research with CLPHA. I don't believe I've had the opportunity to meet everyone on the line. We are expecting a fairly large group today. We have been seriously working on our side to get more information about the comings and goings of the NSPIRE demonstration. I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback again from someone's line. Please make sure you mute your line so that we can limit the background distraction noise. So today I will be talking about where we are with NSPIRE. And then we will also dedicate some time to hear from you all. The main purpose of today is to hear from you and to get your perspective. So, sorry, went a little too far. All right, so we're going to start off by giving you an overview of what NSPIRE is. First, hopefully most of you are familiar with it. For those of you that are not, we'll talk a little bit about it. We have invited PHAs that are in the NSPIRE as well as the NSPIRE V demonstration, and hope we will dedicate some time to hear from you all on your experience. And I think that would be very valuable to our PHAs that are not in the demonstration to hear about what your experience has been. And then we'll have some time dedicated to hearing your general concerns about the implementation of NSPIRE for both public housing and housing choice voucher. This portion of the agenda is fairly important to us because we are drafting a comment letter to HUD that's due on August 1st. And we want to make sure that we capture your feedback and any challenges that you would be anticipating with the implementation of NSPIRE at your agency. Like I mentioned, the request for comments are due on August 1st. However, if you've had a chance, and hopefully you have, to look at the Federal Register notice that talked about the latest NSPIRE standards, it was attached to your meeting invitation. It's talking specifically about NSPIRE standards version 2.2. We'll get a little bit more into that later. But this comment letter that HUD has requested is very narrowly focused on specific standards. So sorry, give me 1 second. Someone's asked for live transcription. Yes, enable. So yes, so the NSPIRE standards that we'll be talking about, we will not go into every single question that HUD has laid out in their Federal Register. Some of them are a bit too weedy, I think, for our group. However, we will touch on some high-level concerns and things that you all should be able to provide context. And then we will talk about next steps, what we're doing at CLPHA and what you can be doing at your agency to get prepared. All right, so what is NSPIRE? Currently, as you all are, I'm sure, very familiar with, there are two inspection protocols used for HUD programs. There's a Housing Quality Standard Program for the Housing Choice Voucher Program and PBV programs, and the Uniform Physical Conditions Standards for Public Housing, UPCS short for, I'm sorry, I keep wanting to say UPCSV, we'll go there a little bit later, but for public housing currently, the protocol in place is UPCS. So HUD has been for many, many years trying to align and standardize these two protocols. They've had a UPCS V demonstration, and then in 2019, they started the NSPIRE demonstration. This has been many, many legacy inspection models that have kind of come along over the years, and they've settled upon NSPIRE being the demonstration that they are going to be moving forward with. It's been a 2-year process under NSPIRE to test the standards, processes, and protocols. And they've been working with 4,500 volunteer properties, and quite a few of you, like I mentioned before on the call, are specifically our CLPHA members. HUD periodically has been publishing the NSPIRE standards on its website. So it's very important to understand this distinction between what's published in the Federal Register versus what's published on their website. If you're trying to learn about NSPIRE, one of the things you want to do is look at both, because there's quite a bit of information on HUD's website, tools, resources, fact sheets, et cetera, on their website. And in particular, the NSPIRE standards have been posted on their website. So in the Federal Register, it has the specific questions they have about the standards, but you typically need to go to the website to look at the standards, understand correction timelines and things of that nature. And the latest version of the standards were released on June 23rd of this year. And I have the website here for you all to check out those standards. If you haven't, I would strongly suggest you look at them, as well as your staff. HUD's been consistently asking for feedback throughout this process on these standards. And this is just the latest version of their process for that. So there are 3 types of NSPIRE inspections, which you're mostly, if you're in the demonstration, you're probably most familiar with the self-inspections. Those are the ones that are done by PHAs by doing a self-inspection of units. And you would submit your results electronically to HUD using a HUD provided tablet. And then there are the CTQ inspections, critical to quality inspections. Those are done mainly by contractor inspectors and PHAs every 1 to 5 years, depending on the previous inspection score. And those are focused on factors deemed that are most important to housing quality. That again goes back to those standards that are mentioned on HUD's website. And then there are the CTQ plus inspections. That's where HUD federal inspectors will conduct a CTQ plus inspection, which is triggered by more poor property conditions. So hopefully that's none of you all, you haven't had to experience those just yet. But the purpose of the different types of inspections is that they're gathering data from many different avenues with these inspections. So that's, I don't want to spend too much time today dedicated to giving too much of a teacher lesson on what NSPIRE is. And so if you definitely have questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to me. I'll have Malcolm Guy put my email address in the chat for you all if you have additional questions. But I did want to spend a significant time of our agenda today to hear from you. We have quite a few CLPHA members that are in the NSPIRE demo, which is focused primarily on multifamily and public housing. And then we have only about 4 housing authorities in our membership that are in the NSPIRE V demo. So I am going to pause and hope to hear from some of you that are on the call to hear about your experience. So feel free to raise your hand if you have a experience you would like to share. We're curious about how the process has worked, how the communication has been with HUD, how the tablet works, what are some concerns about implementation that you have, things of that nature. So I'm going to pause for a few minutes and hope we can get some feedback from folks. And I'm sorry, Malcolm, I can't see everyone in the waiting rooms. I'm sorry, not waiting room, but the participant list. So if you see someone.
Yeah, everyone should be able to unmute themselves. I just ask that when you're not speaking, you obviously keep yourself on mute, but this is the portion of the call where we're really hoping to hear feedback from all of you. So please do feel free to unmute yourself and just go ahead.
Hi, this is Ann from Housing Authority, City of Los Angeles, HACLA. We've had a handful of multifamily and 2 public housing, and we have a couple of public housing demos coming up under the NSPIRE. So far, the biggest takeaway, the communication with, well, because BISCO is basically doing them all. HUD contracted it out with BISCO. So these inspections are not part of any of the reverse auction processes.
Tracy, was that you? I'm so sorry. You went out for a second.
No, Ann Lynch from HACLA.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you sounded like Tracy. I'm sorry. I can't see your face, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so we've had a handful, a couple of public housing, couple of multifamily. We have a couple more public housing coming up. Actually, one on Wednesday. These are not part of the reverse auction process. So HUD contracted with BISCO, or at least BISCO has all the ones we're doing in California. And they've been fine in terms of coordinating and working with us and scheduling. The takeaway that I've gotten from my staff who have been monitoring them is, there have been issues with the computer, the device the inspectors used. So that's still, not quite smooth. That's probably the biggest takeaway. In terms of, not ready for prime time.
Mhm.
Would be that. Also, and I don't know if you noticed, but with the version 2.2 standards, they took out the rationales, and they also took out the tools and equipment. But yet on the notice for comment the week prior, on the, a couple days prior to that, they're introducing, they have comments about new tools and equipment for inspectors to carry. So there's some inconsistency, in terms of they're asking about the tools and equipment, but a week later they took them all out of the standard. So we'll be adding comment about that and what we're drafting right now.
Okay, great. That's really helpful to know. Can we dig a little bit deeper into the issues with the devices? Are they just not connecting to PIG? What type of issues are you having?
On one of the inspections, the inspector just couldn't get his device to work. And from what I understand, he had to actually kind of like, use his phone or something. So we have another one again on Wednesday. So I'll be able to be at that one on Wednesday to kind of see for myself. It'll be the same inspector.
Mhm.
But yeah, basically issues with the device, working or syncing. Yeah.
Now, when he had to use his phone, my understanding is a web-based platform. Was he able to just pull up the same type of app he would have used on the tablet, for instance, or is it something he had to do a standalone checklist and go back in and add in the data?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I'll double check with my staff person who was on that inspection.
Okay, that would be definitely helpful to know.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Others, are you all concerned to have participated in the demo site, your experience you observed?
Hi, Janelle. This is Jason Winton from Atlanta Housing. And I just put it in the chat that we actually did not participate in the demo. So I'm not sure.
Really? Okay.
Right.
Now I will tell you. So we were at our summer meeting, and we got feedback from some of our sites, but some of our members that they volunteered to be an NSPIRE demonstration site and then never heard back from HUD. So a couple of the classroom members are not listed on this list, or those two that highlighted that issue for us. And that's one of my areas of concern, is that they are putting on their website that they have volunteers for this demonstration that are not actually having a role in the demonstration. They haven't been given tablets. They haven't been working with their field office, and to no fault of their own, they just have not had communication with HUD. So that's very good to know from Atlanta's perspective, because you were one of the ones that we received a list directly from HUD that you all were participating in NSPIRE B demonstration. So thank you for that. That's helpful. Are there others on the list that was an issue for?
Yeah, Janelle, this is Ed Lowndes in Kansas City. We're also on the list, but other than a preliminary contact, maybe over 2 years ago, we have not had any interaction with HUD or any contractors regarding the NSPIRE demo.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you, if that's helpful to know.
Hi, Janelle. This is Monica Watkins with HABC. We are a participant, and I'm going to ask our VP of Administration, Bill Peach, or our contractor, DeBello, to weigh in on this conversation.
Great, thank you.
Bill or Phil?
I think I got my microphone turned on now. Is it on?
Yes.
Good afternoon. This is Dennis DeBello with American Property Consultants. I work very closely with the Baltimore Housing Authority, and we've had a great relationship over the last 15 years or so with all these inspections. And I noted a couple comments along the way. In the UPCSV program, they gave computers, but in the NSPIRE program with Marv Goldstein and Bisco, they're not given the properties computers. Were you aware of that?
I was not. So when you say computers, are you meaning tablets, or are you meaning an actual like laptop computer?
Well, I do mean a tablet for the inspection.
So they're no longer giving tablets away.
No. In the V program, UPCSV, they did a great job of getting out there and educating the property about what was going on and participating in the inspection. But what we've seen so far on the East Coast here with Marv's inspections, and I know Marv personally, I was a REACT inspector back in 1998, starting this out when he started his company out with all this. So we've both been around since the beginning. And we talk periodically about what's going on. And they're not giving out any tablets. They're not coming out doing much of an education of the site personnel. They are focused on getting in there and getting an inspection done and getting out. And some of the comments that have been made to me by folks participating, again, on the East Coast, Pennsylvania and Maryland, Virginia. One gentleman sent me a message the other day. We were chatting. He said they were in and out of there in 2 hours doing the inspection. So it seems that they're not doing what they did with UPCSV, which was a great job. They had a great team together at HUD, and they were providing computers and the software and talking through things. People were dissatisfied because they're not getting anything more than the exigent health and safeties, meaning the 24-hour items to take care of right away. And that's what we've seen so far. And I do agree with the lady there, I believe California, mentioned the thing about taking out the rationale codes. I've followed this all along. And when they took those out of there, I was appalled, because that's the basis of why they're inspecting the item. If they remove that, then down the road, arbitrarily, anybody can change these definitions without consideration of why was I inspecting it in the first place. So those rationale codes are extremely important. And not only that, they did it in between issuing the Federal Register and then a few days later changing what was up online and revising it to 2.2.
So what they revised is the rationale codes went away online as well.
Yes, they wiped them out. They're still in the format. They're still in the discussion. I believe they're talked about in the Federal Register too. So a real inconsistency in what they did there.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is Ann from Hacklick, and I'm going to piggyback on what he just said also, is that the inspections have been taking significantly less time than your standard UPCS inspection. It's like they want to get in, they want to get out and be done with it. Sorry to interrupt.
Does it feel as if they're not being thorough, or is it, I'm just wondering if they're saying, oh, well, it's so much more streamlined that we don't need as much more time, or do you just feel like they're just rushing to get the numbers up?
Not sure, but I will also say though that the responding to deficiencies on the online system is going to be really painful for all of us, because it's not just the EHSs you have to respond to and show proof of abating or correcting, with work orders or copies of the work, pictures of the work. It's going to be for all deficiencies. So Oakland can attest to this. If they're on the line, they already had to do their submissions also for a couple of their demos.
Can you talk a little bit more about the process for responding to deficiencies?
It's all on this web-based system they have, and they'll give you the link, after your inspection, and you'll designate X amount of people within your agency who can respond to that inspection. Yeah, you have to go in, and for each deficiency, again, regardless if it's emergency or not, you have to record correction. You have to submit documentation or proof of that correction. So like a closed work order and or picture of the work. Yeah, and they're still tweaking that system as well. But it's for having to respond to every single deficiency, it was going to be really painful.
And it's not just the 24-hour ones, it's every single one.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Can I add in something? This is Dennis again.
Sure.
One of the general comments across the board that I'm hearing from folks and that we're seeing, and I work with FADA across the US on this as well, is we ended up now with more exigent health and safety that we had under UPCS. And of course, some people were saying too many 24-hour items. Some things are reasonable, that if it can cause some kind of life-harming issue, immediately, then definitely it needs to be a 24-hour. But if it's a matter of bulbs burned out and an exit sign, there's not a direct relationship that it's going to harm somebody. Of course, it is a safety device, and we do want to get it repaired more immediately. The other part of this is that what we're really getting now is we've gotten rid of the severity concept of the levels 1s, 2s, and 3s, and we've reduced the population of items from 74 items down to 62. And some items have gone away completely, like vegetation on the property. We're not going to look at trees touching buildings and vines growing on the side of the building and all that kind of stuff, because it doesn't have any effect on the resident, which is a great thing. But there's some other things that have been expanded that we're not really understanding yet until it gets to be implementation. But you've got to look at your property from a different point of view, in that what's your 911 response? If the ambulance shows up at the entrance to your property, can they find the building and unit where somebody's at? That's under address signage. And they've completely changed that from being the property sign looking at it 20 feet away and it's legible, to that responsing having numbers on buildings and actually the label on a unit door with the number being readable and such. Going back to the 24-hour items, so some of them are 24 hours for public housing, but they're 30 days for multifamily, or not multifamily, but for the housing choice voucher program for the HQS type inspection. And of course, the 30-day concept came out of that. I do an inspection and the landlord's got to repair it in 30 days and I've got to re-inspect it. And that's codified under that program. That's getting rolled back into public housing. So now I got to make repairs in 30 days where I might not have the material or the manpower or even be in the time of the year, like painting outside. So on 30 days, we need to have a broader perspective of can there be an extension on that with extenuating circumstances? And it almost needs to be programmed in there, because we work with Prince George's County, Maryland, 5,000 HQS a year. We see all kinds of situations like that arise where you can't get the materials, you can't get the parts, you can't paint in the winter. So there's all kinds of extenuating circumstances. So the other part of that is somebody raised the question the other day. Actually, it was in Baltimore. We were having some sessions there, and somebody said, "Well, Dennis, you're gonna come do a react on us, and then the next day we have 30 days to complete all this work. You're going to overload our system, and plus, meanwhile, we're trying to do what we've already got scheduled and such." So that's kind of unrealistic in a way too. Again, we haven't seen that because we haven't been there yet, but looking ahead.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And that's a little bit later in the agenda, we'll talk about some of the severity levels and specific items that we think should not be considered 24 hours, some things that could take 30 days, some things that depending on like you mentioned, supply chain issues are very, very big problems for a lot of housing authorities right now. So how do and not just housing authorities, for landlords in general, and how do we keep folks in compliance and also families safe, but then balance the two. So yeah, so we'll definitely dedicate some time in the agenda later to talk about those specifics. I did have a follow-up question. I'm not sure exactly who mentioned this, but for the because they're not giving out, and this is very good information to know, the tablets any longer. Are you having to provide your staff with tablets or cell phones that have internet capability in order to do these type of inspections? So are you incurring the costs now to that?
We at HABC are incurring the costs for getting technology in the hands of our team, our inspection team. And I'm not sure, Dennis, if you want to add anything else. Bill is having connectivity issues. He can see our lips moving, but he can't speak on it. Bill is in charge of our inspection team.
Okay, that's helpful to know, because that's certainly one of the feedback items that I intend to talk to HUD about, is the fact that there will be some fairly large startup costs to getting the agency ready to do NSPIRE. So that's helpful to know. Okay. Any other folks that have had either similar experiences or other experiences that we should be aware of that the other members who have not participated in the demonstration would be helpful for them to know.
Dennis, did you have any other feedback from the sessions we held? Would you have like 6 sessions with various developments?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we did, so Baltimore does have some in the program. And again, the inspections, they're not really educating the staff about what's going on. And as far as the computer goes, everybody's on their own to provide their own equipment. However, as Ashley Sharif has said, they're developing this software that they want you to report not only the exigent health and safeties in, but they're looking that they want to have at least a work order per unit provided to them to provide part of that reasonable assurance that you're doing your annual inspections. So one of the things to note here is that you all have a software vendor that's providing your housing management software right now. And a lot of those are integrated with the inspections for generating work orders and such. So you may end up with 2 platforms that you're working with, the HUD platform to report the HUD, and then your own accounting platform. And I think, one of the other things that came out of the sessions with Baltimore last week, which is kind of an eye opener in a way, but it's not something that's extremely surprising when you stop and think about it, is that UPCS is REACT's compliance software to ensure you're in compliance with the regulation. And as you said, when we started out, the definitions for UPCS were codified in the Federal Register. The definition, the standards, the NSPIRE standards will not be codified, so they can be changed without going back to Congress to get approval. But the thing is that it's a compliance inspection. It's a compliance software. Your software for identifying and making repairs, as a lot of folks at Baltimore session said, well, Dennis, we still want to know that that tree's touching the building or it's got a dead branch because we got to go out there and do maintenance. So UPCS was not a maintenance inspection software, and NSPIRE will even be less. Especially if we're only looking at level 3s down the road per se. So I'll stop there because I know you have more you want to tell about the level 3 severities and such.
No, that's helpful to know. You talked about it's helpful for you to know, like in terms of thinking through like your property condition and things you need to plan for long term. So that's really helpful to know the differences between the 2 inspection protocols and how going from the consequences of going, I think you mentioned was 72 standards down to 74 down to 62 items. And
right.
So the difference between those 14 items, what are you losing there, right? So what type of capital needs for you being able to identify through those inspections that you no longer can do?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll just add, and if our Chief Information Officer, Jimmy Thomas, believe is on the line and can give his perspective as well. But we just had a meeting because we need to be able to capture these work orders anyway into our system. And there was a little bit of a debate going on about, abandoning the UPCS codes and nomenclature in favor of NSPIRE, which will be effective in April of 2023. And so it was sort of an eye opener and also a flag for our vendor, our software vendor, that we don't want to have them change what's in the system, which is UPCS, until we have NSPIRE. And yet we have to get everybody focused on NSPIRE. So it's a little bit of a interesting place to be in, but software will have to be changed, and that's not going to be quick, and it's going to be costly.
Have you gotten any idea about, and definitely those are the 2 biggest concerns, right? Quick and costly, right? Have you gotten any estimates yet from, this is some feedback we've gotten from HUD is that they're working with the top software vendors to get prepared, and they've been reassured that they're ready and willing and able to go as soon as April
Really?
2023.
Okay.
I'm very skeptical. So I'm just curious what your conversations have been with your software vendor and kind of what their concerns
Right.
are at this point.
I don't think we've had that conversation with them because we just had the conversation with our CIO. And I don't know, Jimmy, are you able to come off mute?
Yes, I
Okay,
did have
good.
a conversation with the company,
Okay.
and they are engaged with the meetings with HUD,
Mhm,
just like the other big guys on the block.
mhm.
And they're just kind of holding their cards to their chest and waiting for the final regs.
Okay.
And I I kind of understand and agree with part of it, and part of it I don't. But their position is when the final regs come out, we will work with that. But until then, we're not going to put any development effort or research effort in developing a product that may or may not come to fruition.
Yeah.
So I can agree with that side. It's from a business side as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they said, just like with HQSV, that's been going on for what 5-6 years now.
Yeah.
And
Long
they
time.
said, just imagine if we had put resources in that every time HUD came out with a change, but we still don't have a product to even produce. So, but they said yes, they are highly engaged with the meeting. They follow the regs and the announcements, but they're not going to put any development resource dollars into a product until they get the final rulings.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what I was combating back with HUD. And like, I worked in housing authorities and I've worked with where they were going through just a normal software upgrade, and it took in excess of 12 months just for a normal software upgrade. So taking on something completely new seems to me like it's just not realistic in the timeline that they've outlined. And we'll talk a little bit more about the timeline a little bit later. But that's very helpful feedback.
Can I give a corollary to that as well?
Mhm.
And the corollary is back in 1998, when we started out with UPCS to begin with, they gave all the housing authorities an advisory score over the first year of implementation. We haven't heard any kind of conversation about that at all. You cannot just turn on a light bulb April 2023 and all of a sudden we're all doing NSPIRE and we know what we're doing. That's just ludicrous to think that it's going to work like that. They may be ready, but the industry, like the gentleman's saying, nobody's going to expend resources in advance. Everybody's been waiting to see. I mean, COVID pushed it off for 2 years. We were supposed to be in there September 2021. So advisory scores is something the industry should be speaking back, saying, are we going to do the advisory score routine like we did the last time we had a major change of this? Because it's going to take time for people to acclimate to the new compliance.
Yeah, I agree with you. Can I just clarify? I just want to make sure I understand. So are you saying that they have not been doing advisory scores under NSPIRE?
Pilot program, yes. I'm just saying overall for the implementation, we have seen nothing that speaks to. So you said in our introduction, you'll get a 1 to 5 year inspection. That's of course based on the score and that kind of thing. But everybody's score, not just the 4,500 in the pilot, should be advisory the first time out.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. So that you get used to it, you have time to train your staff, have time to acquire the materials. Yeah, all those things definitely make sense.
And just to piggyback on that, I mean, it's, the obvious that we all know is HUD hasn't even come out with any sort of, proposed scoring mechanism. So we don't know, what a deficiency would cost the site. So you don't really know how to, prioritize your resources given the deficiencies listed. So, and it's going to be, I mean, when they did the initial and UPCS scoring, I mean, that was a couple of iterations of comments back and forth. So they haven't started that process yet.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. So one of the other things that HUD is saying is that there will be, they believe they are on track to have all of the stages of proposed rulemaking done before April 2023, and part of that will be including publishing the scoring mechanism. I don't believe that's possible, but that's very helpful. I mean, you have to have time to absorb that to provide actual feedback to that in its own right, because as you said, prioritizing how you how that score is going to hit you, what things you need to focus on, what things you can and cannot focus on because of availability of certain things is very helpful. Okay. Any other concerns from the demonstration sites? And then we're going to move on to hear from all of the rest of our members about your just general concerns about NSPIRE, but any other feedback from those of you all that are in the demonstration. Okay, so I'm going to move us on. Okay, so questions for our general membership. Prior to implementing NSPIRE at public housing, multifamily, and our vouchers for our voucher units, what should HUD consider? So part of our comment letters where we want to focus, even though they haven't asked us, we want to focus a large portion of this letter on what things HUD should be considering outside of what the very narrow things they've asked us for at this stage, because we definitely want to make sure that our voices are heard early. And like someone said before, this has been a very long process dating back to UPCSB, and it's just been quite a bit of a black box. So I think it's really important that as things develop, and we still have quite a bit of ways going before it is actually implemented, to provide feedback. But anyway, so I'm going to pause here and pose some questions to you all so that we can gather your feedback. What's a reasonable implementation timeline? I've heard that for the first year, advisory scores should be advisory. I think that's very important. But we are all still dealing with COVID, right? And we're all still, I've heard from some agencies that have had to go back to remote, come off remote, go back to remote. There are staff implications with that. You've had staff shortages that have led to some backlog inspections. So what realistically, if you had a crystal ball and you can make your wish on what would be a reasonable implementation on that timeline, I want to hear from you all on that. First and foremost, because it's not going to go away. They're definitely going to continue pushing for standardizing these inspection protocols. But I do think we have the opportunity to give feedback here. And then what are some of the technology considerations? Definitely hearing the fact that you would have to provide your own technology would be costly. But what are some other things we need to talk about? Definitely hearing the feedback about making sure that the software vendors, all of the software vendors that you all use, and for those of you that have your own software, what are some of the considerations that are required? And does your housing authority have backlog inspections right now from COVID? What's your anticipated completion timeline? How would that be impacted by implementing NSPIRE? And what are your staff training needs? I know that's a pretty big question at this stage without having experienced NSPIRE at your agency. So you may not know exactly, but just curious in onboarding a new inspector, what that normally looks like and what type of things you would need. And what are other things that HUD should consider? So I'm going to pause there. Jack, I see your hand up, so I'm going to yield the floor to you.
Great, thanks, Janelle. I'll highlight some of the sort of recommendations we've been thinking about at HPD. It really aligns with a lot of what folks have been saying already, so there may not be a ton of new information, but
no, it's good to hear the multiple voices. So good.
Yes, validating. Yeah, I mean, on the implementation timeline, I think you mentioned, like the contracting component itself can take, a year plus. So I think with that sort of, even before that, a key dependency is like having all of the notices final, the program guidance, process guidance, tech guidance, et cetera, like that all needs to be final before we can really go into the contracting process. Mm-hmm. And so with that dependency in mind, I think we were thinking one approach for implementation timeline could be, a year plus after all of the final rules are published is a more reasonable time frame than, April or October of 2023. On the technology side, I think, it's hard to say a lot of details because a lot of this is still a bit unclear to us, but I think, high level, we would prefer that, changes be as minimal as possible. So either, no additional reporting requirements, not many system changes or no system changes, which is sort of what the guidance was this stated in writing, but it seems in conversation this may be not the case. So either no or minimal changes, or some tech solution that's really like plug and play, like really easy to kind of implement. On the backlog inspections side, I think maybe others at HPD could speak more to this, but I do believe we have a backlog, and this will affect the implementation. But I think that there are so many other factors here that is not something that has been as sort of front of mind. And yeah, on the staff training side, others can speak more to the detail, but I think just given the substantial scope of work, both in terms of like the large changes to policy, business process, but also like the technology changes, the staffing changes, et cetera. I think, in addition to like extending the timeframe to implement, like providing some additional funding to help cover costs associated with implementation, be it technology, tools, et cetera, but also just resources for training and contracting, et cetera. I think that would also be something that would be helpful in this implementation. But others at HPD could probably fill in some of the gaps on maybe some of the details that I missed. But I think those are sort of our top line thoughts. We agree on the sort of 24-hour turnaround stuff that was already discussed. So I think that's everything on our end.
Okay, that's helpful, Jack. Are others from HPD on the line you want to fill in?
Hi, this is Betsy Scheinbart. I am temporarily working with the HQS unit here at HPD. We have our city code inspectors doing our inspections for us. That probably won't be possible once NSPIRE is implemented, because mostly because of the 24-hour issues. They're currently up to April for our Brooklyn and the Bronx inspection. I'm sorry, our Brooklyn and Queens Staten Island inspections, and they're only about a month behind for Manhattan and the Bronx. But because we would probably need a whole new group of inspectors, either contracted out or hired separately, that's a huge concern for us as far as personnel.
Okay. Would others be required to hire new inspectors? Do you anticipate having staff shortages in that area as well? Or are just y'all anticipating training up your current inspectors? Okay, I'm going to pause for one more second. We'll move on.
I can add something to that from working with York Housing Authority in York, Pennsylvania. I'll call her the newer executive director. She's been there 3 or 4 years now. When she was hired for that job and she went up to York, actually from the Baltimore area, she called us up and she said, "Dennis, we need some help to get through inspections. We're backlogged on inspections and we need some help to get through it. And I need to hire some new inspectors." So a lot of the folks on the HQS side of the house, when they went to biennial inspections, kind of caught themselves in a little bit of trouble of getting backlogged, because now you're on a 2-year cycle and you got to complete that 2-year cycle actually before the 2 years. Long story short of it all was that staff augmentation through hiring outside inspectors is part of a solution. And what I think I see here, if you look back to 1998 and you look what went on with UPCS, it was 2 to 3, 4, even 5 years, which is on a standard performer, multiple reactive inspection cycles before people were able to get their staff up and running. Now, we did a great job with York. My job was to get in there, knock out the backlog and help them get to the point where they had new certified inspectors, which we helped train. And we're out of there. And I'm happy with that. That's my goal as an outside contractor. So in some cases, that happens sooner than later, but I don't think anybody's with everything still in a state of flux. Like the one lady said, we don't know what's really important in this inspection until we see the scoring. So until you see it and you experience it, and then you are able to make some assessment, it may be a couple years of transition before you can get there. So yeah, you're going to train your existing staff, you're going to hire new staff, and you might augment your staff in between getting there. So that's kind of a point of view for you that I thought I'd share.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And I have some, I'm just going to call out some folks. I have quite a few of my committee members on this call. So excuse me in advance. I'm going to call out on some folks just to kind of get a good sense of where we are nationwide. So Cheryl, would you mind talking a little bit about Chicago? I know you don't have your inspectors online. I'm just curious where you all are in terms of your backlog at this point.
Oh, yeah, we are, actually, I didn't look at the numbers, but.
That's fine, just generalize it for me.
So, yeah, we still had a couple thousand left to go, but I was thinking that as I was listening to the conversation that if we're gonna change processes or, formats, like what would be the benefit of continuing on again, why catch up? Right? Other than my single agency auditors will be out. So I guess there's that. But yeah, we are really at the beginning. We had actually, because we're an MTW agency, considered making this an MTW activity and keeping HQS. So that was one of the things that we had bandied about, whether or not we could do something different than NSPIRE. We have been in contact with Yardi, and similar to, I think it was LA, they say, oh, we'll be ready, but they don't have the final rules. They don't know what testing they'll need to do or anything. So I don't know what work they've done other than assuring us that they will be ready.
They haven't given you any idea if they've actually started building any infrastructure as well.
No, just we'll be ready is all that we're getting, because we're asking the same questions.
Okay, that's helpful. And you actually brought up a good thought too about, so if you have backlog inspections and they turn the light bulb on for NSPIRE, which protocol would you actually do those inspections under? And if you're in potentially a correction timeline, it would be a requirement under, like say if you're under HQS, you did the inspection under HQS, you're in the correction timeline, how would that roll out if you fall dead smack into NSPIRE now and you're in your correction timeline period? So definitely some clarity around that I think would be helpful. And how you explain this to landlords, I'm sure it's going to be interesting. How about in NYCHA? What's going on out in New York City? I know we heard from HPD, but I'm curious what's happening with NYCHA's inspections right now.
Sure. Hi, Janelle. This is Lillian Harris from obviously NYCHA. So my feedback is very similar. Like implementation wise, we can get up and running, but there is a learning curve and also impact to the length of inspections, which could impact the number of staff required. So that's my main concern. If the inspections will be taken longer, then we may need to do staff augmentation. Our intent is to train up existing staff. We are currently dealing with the backlog as a result of COVID, so that would impact us as well. And that's pretty much it. I think there is an impact in terms of staffing that we don't know about yet until we move forward with the protocol. And I'm not sure if Robert or Menorca have anything else to add.
I'll let you summarize that. Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm just looking at who else is on the call to make sure I get a good geographic representation. Rashad, how's it going out in your agency with your backlog? Do you have a backlog at this point?
Sorry, I was trying to get off on mute.
Sorry, I surprised folks, I know.
Yeah, I'm probably going to defer this to Kristen from our agency if she's on, because she really manages the HQS contract for us.
Okay.
One thing we do is for current HQS, we actually have our nonprofit, one of our nonprofit affiliates that runs an inspection program and does all our HQS for us. We did have a backlog, of course, from the deferment during the COVID kind of time frame, but I think we've done a good job in catching up. But I'll let Kristen give us a more accurate update on that. Hopefully she's on.
Hi, everyone. Yes, we are working on backlog right now. We anticipate having that cleared up by the end of this year.
Okay. Doribet, what's going on in your area?
I'm sorry, I joined a little late due to.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm just catching up, but yes, we still have a backlog because we also deferred inspections during COVID. But in just hearing a little bit that was shared just now, the staffing, like if we have to ramp up staffing, we're already having issues with staffing, even though we've third-partied out our HQS inspection. So if we're going to require additional staffing because the inspections will take longer, that's another like giant hurdle that we're going to be faced with.
Okay, that's helpful to know. What are some concerns about getting, for those of you all that do contract out your services, what are some considerations that need to be made for getting your contractors staffed up and getting your contractors the new training, because I'm sure going to be costs to them incurred for that as well. How does that, I mean, I don't think you've ever had to deal with this before where you would have a contract that would have to go and get new training. But have there been other opportunities where you've had to work with a contractor that needed to get a certification before they could do that type of service for the housing authority you've had to try to manage? Or are there concerns? Is that something that you expect if you contract out, they'll know what they're doing and they'll be ready to go come the implementation timeline? I'm a little skeptical there, but I'm curious in your thoughts.
Yeah, Janelle, this is Rashad again from San Bernardino. I can tell you that, like I'd mentioned before, because the majority of our inspections are contracted with one of our nonprofits, we are able to really control that a lot more because, we have kind of a much more closer working relationship with them than just a regular contractor. However, we do have a third party, just non-related contractor for certain inspections, which are a conflict of interest for Reliant to do. And we have been experiencing real requests for increase in that contract, obviously due to costs such as fuel costs and other things that are going on. But they've been exponential, those requests. So it is a real concern for us that added training, learning a new format will really require at least the third-party contractors that are not affiliated with us to put in large increases for renewal.
Yeah, that's very helpful to know. Okay, so I am going to move us on unless any other members had any questions or specific feedbacks to these questions that are on your screen. If not, we'll dive into the hardest part of this meeting. Dinsiri, I'm sorry, I see your hand raised. I don't have everything in front of me. It's kind of weird. I'm on two different screens right now. So go ahead, Dinsiri.
No worries, Janelle. And I'm not sure if I missed the opportunity. One of the things I wonder about is if there's anyone on the call who's been part of the demonstration with respect to housing choice vouchers and HQS. I feel like I know nothing about things, and we've spent a lot of time at HPD trying to dig in to understand what the differences are. And we've even had some conversations with HUD folks, but I don't know that there's been a lot of focused time on the impact on HCV and what this whole thing looks like when the PHA is not the landlord and has to really shift substantially, and whether we should actually be pushing for more piloting and demonstration in the HCV world before even contemplating implementation.
Yes, so I think that's a great question, and I'm going to bounce us back for a second to actually clarify that. Give me 1 second, my screen. Okay, so Atlanta Housing is actually not in the demonstration, although HUD sent us a list indicating that they were. So that was helpful information. But do we have anyone from Akron, Albany, or Cook County that's on the line that can confirm or deny if they are actually participating in the demonstration, the NSPIRE V demo specifically? I know we invited folks from each of those agencies onto this call. I'm not sure if they made it on. But Densiri, I hear you. And I, when I was actually doing the cross comparison of so there are only 140 PHAs that are in the NSPIRE V demonstration, which on the surface level is already concerning, comparing the vast amount of PHAs that are on the public housing and multifamily side that have been in the demonstration. So I'm with you. I'm already there and wanting to push for more demonstration pilot time on the NSPIRE V portion. HUD's been fairly non-committal to their implementation timeline for the NSPIRE V demonstration. They've said that they they anticipate being able to do April 2023. But that they're not at the point where that's what's the word, finalized. But I definitely am concerned by the lack of PHAs and particularly CLPHA members that are in this. I'm actually going to be reaching out to our other counterparts with FADA, because I think it's been more so focused on smaller housing authorities. I used to work, for instance, with Loudoun County, running their voucher program, and we were in NSPIRE V demonstration site, and we had a very similar experience to some of the stories we've been hearing, that we were in the UPCSV demonstration, and then NSPIRE V kind of got rolled out. And then there was this big black box of lack of information coming from HUD, what we should be doing as the new NSPIRE V demo site. So I honestly don't think it's a lot of good information there. So if we don't have anyone from Akron, Albany, or Cook County on the line, we can definitely reach out to them after this call to see if they have any additional feedback. But then Siri, I'm definitely going to be talking with some of our FADA colleagues and NARO, who I think have more members on the NSPIRE V side, to see if they can provide us with some feedback. Because I am with you. I don't think we have enough information at this point to really know what we're heading into. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's kind of where we are.
No, incredibly helpful. Thank you so much.
No problem. All right.
I can add a small piece to that, if you will.
Yeah.
The NSPIRE pilot had 4,500 participants, and as you said, the NSPIRE V, if you will, has 140. They did not close that out. You can volunteer for that and sign up for that and participate. They are still taking additional people.
That's good to know. See, even that I think is it's a bit of a black box of information. Okay, that's helpful. Maybe we will put out an alert to our members to sign up for it at this point. Have they given any indication of how much longer they're going to be taking new? But if you all don't know, I can certainly find that out.
Well, no, actually, Sharif said this in one of her phone call meetings that we had with her, and they feel the same exact way that you said. 140 is certainly not. The housing choice voucher program is bigger than public housing. So certainly this is no slice of the pie at all in terms of a sample size. So they want to have a lot more participation. And I'm at a loss for figuring out what it means to have REACT show up at a landlord's property.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like either. And I'm just on the surface level very concerned with making anything harder for landlords to participate in the voucher program. I know we all hear about how it's tough to recruit and retain landlords, particularly in this really, really tight rental market. And when you start adding additional layers of inspection requirements, even though HUD's stating, oh, it'll be more streamlined, it'll be easier. Anything new, there's always change management that comes along with it, and educating your landlords on what that process will look like is a big part of the process. And I don't see it happening in the timeline that they have outlined. So, okay, so let's move on. We have the fun part of this this session to talk about. So I promised earlier I was not going to dig into there are 12 separate questions in the, I believe it's 12 or 13, excuse me, separate questions in the request for comment in the Federal Register on the latest version of the 2.2 standards. And they're very weedy, but the ones that I wanted to focus on and get you all's feedback from, we will dig into here. And if you do not have the answers to these, that's totally fine. We have a small window to provide feedback. But again, I don't think this is going to be the only bite at the apple. So we'll continue. And one thing that it's interesting, we've heard the concern about the fact that the standards won't be codified. That is certainly a concern. But HUD would say, oh, well, that's intentional so that we can continually revise the standards and be more responsive to the industry and things like that. But we'll take that with a grain of salt. So I'm going to start us off by talking about mold, mold-like substance standard. So one of the things in the Federal Register notice that HUD is proposing to do is to include a standard related to mold risk. And that would require inspectors to identify sources of moisture/mold with required use of moisture meters. Now, please bear with me. I am not an inspector. I've worked in housing authorities for many years, but I've never had to actually do an inspection. So I'm very curious in you all's, for those of you all that are online that have had the opportunity to dive into an inspection, observe, supervise, do a quality review inspection, what your feedback on this requirement would be. First and foremost, is this reasonable? Is it reasonable as an inspection standard? Are the equipment requirements reasonable? And then what would be an appropriate correction timeline? So I'm going to stop there and then pause and see if folks have immediate feedback.
Hi, this is Ann from HACLA again. Yeah, we got an issue with this. Because the way it's rated, way it reads, they would require one tool, the moisture meter. They're recommending the infrared camera. So, early on, had said, well, we're developing this, so there's be, more consistency, blah, blah, blah. No. You can't have one required, one recommended. You can have inconsistent practices from the inspectors. So you can have the same property being inspected by the same two different inspectors with, using different equipment, and they're going to get different results. There also is no guidance as to what triggers the use of the moisture meter. Is it on every wall? Is it on just walls that seem like they may have something, or is there a smell? So you're going to have, some inspectors, without any guidance, doing every wall in the bathroom or any exterior wall. There's going to be inconsistency. And I got an issue with this one big time.
Okay, that's helpful.
As Maricela, and then just Maricela also from HACLA, just to add to it, I mean, and it really depends on where the property is located. Some properties will naturally just have moisture, a lot of moisture. So what does that mean, and what does that mean in terms of, when you're getting findings in this process?
Yeah, definitely. I imagine in some areas that have more humid climates, that would be an issue. Can I ask what the current standard is for this? Is this a brand new one, or is this something that it's just more requirements here?
So currently under UPCS, you have an item for walls, floors, and ceilings called mold, mildew, water stains, water damage. It has 3 levels of severity depending on the conditions that are found. But before I go on anymore, as a person that's been doing this for 24 years, running an inspection company as well, I am absolutely totally against this from a professional standpoint for a bunch of reasons, 2 of which were just mentioned by the lady speaking up there. We do not want to turn housing into a science project. I think everybody can agree with that. We have thermography cameras in our company that we use for energy efficiency, and you really need to be trained and certified on those, and even moisture meters. So what HUD's doing is they're worried about indoor air quality because of mold and mildew. And they're saying that, well, we're smarter than you, so we're going to come to your property and find out what you don't know. That's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous concept. If anything, I think what's going to come out of some of the NSPIRE standards is that you at housing are going to need to implement procedures and policies where you respond to certain given situations. Like if you have a bad mold and mildew situation, you could end up putting people up in hotels because of the situation. So you need to be prepared ahead of time in terms of mold and mildew outbreaks, because just like the mushrooms popping up in your yard after 3 or 4 days of rain, you know, mold and mildew can pop up like that, and you got to be responsive to it. But I would hope that people are looking at their properties in enough detail that they know they have leaky roofs and leaky windows and doors, and they're getting water moisture intrusion into the property. And having, like the lady said, having inspectors come from the outside who know very little about your property, and they're there in a few hours, they're going to assess it and find problems that you don't see and know every day. And the equipment, who's going to certify it, make sure that it's accurate? And does this mean all the inspectors become infrared certified or thermography camera certified? So it's a science project. I think that if anything, REACT inspectors are generalists. They are making trained observations. This is way beyond a trained observation. And if they do see things, then they should be verifying that you, as the provider of housing, have adequately prepared for this, and you can respond to it in a crisis management.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Jack, I see your hand.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this echoes what folks have said, although perhaps more on the sort of housing choice voucher side. When speaking to the code folks with HPD, yeah, we also don't use these like moisture meters or infrared cameras, and I think we would, greatly prefer to continue to not use them. And I believe that sort of to your question around the correction time frame, I believe this is determined for us within local code. And the correction timeframe we have is a 21 days after notice of violation. So that's sort of the time frame that we have. And something, this may be getting a little into the weeds, but an important sort of distinction that we want to draw in our comment, especially around the 24-hour corrections, is like 24 hours after inspection versus 24 hours after notification of violation. The latter is a little more doable than the former, although there are some circumstances where the former would apply as well. But just another small comment.
That's very helpful. I've always been curious in how you handle 24-hour violations that, for instance, occur on a Friday. How what's the normal standard there? I've heard different answers from different agencies. Some say, well, it has to be corrected by the following business day, or some says are very strict. They need to have the documentation by the following calendar day. Is there any feedback there? And then Ken, I'm sorry, I do see your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Ken from Atlanta Housing, and I just wanted to weigh in on the requirement for moisture meters and infrared technology. in my mind, the inspector's role ends at observing visible mold.
Mm-hmm.
The requirement, those instruments are used for mold remediation
Mm-hmm.
by trained mold remediation companies.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you're asking the inspector to tell the property, whether it's a private landlord on the housing choice side or but to tell the property how to solve the problem. And it's the inspector's role more to identify and point out that you have it.
Mm-hmm.
Most inspectors would not have the training. I mean, mold remediation is a highly trained profession. And giving us, and two of the tools used in mold remediation are infrared cameras and and moisture detectors.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Ken. That's really helpful. Helen?
Gotcha.
Helen, I see your hand.
Hi,
up.
this
Oh, here you go.
this is Helene Heller with NYCHA. I just want to go back to, I thought you mentioned 24 hours. Can you repeat what the question was?
Oh, sure. I was just curious in how agencies are handling 24-hour violations. So if you, for instance, observe a 24-hour violation on a Friday, would the correction period need to be required to be done by that Saturday, or would it be the next business day, which would be the Monday? I've heard different answers from housing authorities. So I'm just curious on what the general consensus on that is.
Right. So I asked that question in relation to our Section 9 REAC inspections on UPCS, very specifically, and I received an answer. When we're cited with an exigent health and safety violation under UPCS, currently there's 24 hours to mitigate, period. 24 hours, calendar, clock, whatever, has nothing to do with business days. If the report from the inspector comes Friday night, then staff have to work evening, overtime, what have you, to mitigate. The business hours only come in to play when you're talking about the time period you have to enter the mitigation status in PASS and then provide the package to the local HUD field office or whoever your single points of contact is that's receiving your package with your work ticket and your before and after photos.
Mm-hmm. Is it different on the voucher side, or is it the same?
I couldn't tell you. I could only answer on the UPCS Section 9 side, sorry.
No, no worries. Anybody else know? I know we have some folks on the voucher program on the line. Juan, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. This is Juan with the LACDA. Pretty much the same as NYCHA indicated. If we have a situation where a 24-hour inspection needs to be conducted, we go out the following day, even if it is 24 hours on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening. We will have an inspector do the overtime to conduct the inspection or certify or confirm that the deficiency or the corrections have been made. So regardless whether it's Friday, we will still go out the following day. The owner or managers does have the 24 hours from the time that the deficiency was noted. So we tell the inspector if it was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we will go back after 4 o'clock the next day within 24 hours. And that's for HCB here in LACDA.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna pause real quick and see if we have any other feedback on mold-like substance. We have a few more to go, and I want to make sure I'm respectful of everyone's time today. Any other last minute feedback on this one? And again, this is not the only opportunity. We'll definitely be reaching back out to you all if you have light bulb moments after this meeting. All right, so let's move on. So the next one is water supply. So I know this is interesting for a lot of you all. Okay, so safe water supply notification. So this one is not necessarily a standard. It's more of a requirement to get ready for the inspection. So HUD is proposing that they would require a property manager or an owner to alert NSPIRE, the NSPIRE inspector of the quote safe water supply conditions in advance. That would require them to alert the inspector if there are any current local water alerts for the jurisdiction, and the name of the public water supply system. My very immediate question for that one to HUD is what they mean by jurisdiction? But then we can talk about others later. And then advise if the property is known to be serviced by a lead service line. And if they don't know, then they have to notify, they have to know where it is, and then also notify the inspector where the water service line point of entry into the building is. So my very first question is this a reasonable standard? And how difficult would it be to provide this information in advance of your inspection? I imagine on the voucher side, it'd be fairly difficult for this one, but I'm curious for those of you all what your feedback is as well. And Ken, I see your hand up, but I think you might have had your hand up for the last point. Okay. All right. Any feedback to this one?
Hi, this is Anne from Hackla again. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, they're just basically reworded what they were trying to put in the 2021 comments. So, you know, especially those of us who are off municipal sources, this should not be part of the standards. We're not responsible for the water coming in. You know, they basically just reworded again what they proposed in 2021 in that comment document. And properties like ours, we have properties that have 35, water meters. So, leads into our property. It should not be part of the standards.
Thanks, Anne. I see a hand raised for an iPhone. I'm not sure who that is. Feel free to unmute yourself.
That's Dennis. Sorry, I don't have a name on there.
No worries.
So I happen to have a special certification for this. I'm a water superintendent in the state of Maryland. So I'm the water superintendent for an 800 home water system. The water supply falls underneath the EPA's Clean Water Act, and it's highly regulated. And it's regulated that the company that provides the supply of that water is responsible for the quality of the water at the tap. Like the lady said, not you at all. So this is a Clean Water Act issue. There's sufficient regulation out there. What happened in Flint, Michigan is somewhat of a limited case, but they're trying to get into the lead pipe situation, but it's way beyond the scope of this inspection in terms of what REACT is doing. The minimum thing that you might need to do so that you're properly advocating for your residents is to basically have a consumer confidence report, CCR. A consumer confidence report is put out by every water supply that supplies water. And depending on the size of it, like something like Baltimore, you actually have to put it on your website, send it out in a letter and such like that. So you may have that available for display. I think that is more than enough to respond to this. You certainly are not going to take on the responsibilities of the water supply company. Now, if you have lead lines on your property, that's a completely different story. But short of that, this is really falling under the EPA regulation. And having the consumer confidence report is where it should end.
Okay, that's helpful. And a question about that, would that be, we always look for opportunity to say, well, HUD should be doing this. Is that information that they could be accessing on their own without involving the property owner or the housing authority?
Absolutely. I can go online and I can look up everybody's consumer confidence report in every jurisdiction in the United States. The EPA, this is what the Clean Water Act came out in 1974 or something. So this is not anything new at all. I was kind of curious. I don't understand HUD's motivation other than responding to media. in terms of, the kind of indoor environmental issues that affect the residents.
Yeah, I think it's heavily driven by that. I would definitely agree with you there. Any other feedback on this requirement? All right, I'm gonna move us on to the next one. So this is where I promised earlier we would get into those questions about what should be considered 24-hour violations and what should not. So HUD is proposing to extend the correction timeline for certain severe non-life-threatening deficiencies that cannot be repaired within 24 hours. And so they're asking us, I think, to identify what those should be. So what should be considered severe and non-life-threatening? What's an appropriate correction timeline for those deficiencies? And what type of things should HUD be considering when determining if something is non-life-threatening? So like, for instance, what type of building permits would you need to get in order to bring it back into compliance, contractor availability, supply chain delays, etc. So I'm going to pause there, and this would be a great time for us to talk about some of those specific concerns you all had about things that are 24-hour violations, particularly your 24-hour violations that are on the public housing and multifamily side that are not 24 hours on the voucher side. I'm curious about those inconsistencies, and then others that you think that are currently being under the new standards labeled as 24 hours that really are not as life-threatening as they're being made out to. And Dennis, I think it was you, if you don't mind if I call on you to talk about this one, if you have specific feedback here.
Sure. I can jump in to help facilitate this.
Thank you.
A couple of the big items, and let me preface this with the situation. As we merge the housing quality standards inspection into the NSPIRE standard inspection, there were already certain repair times associated with things, but on the public housing side or the multifamily side for HUD funded housing, there was really only, there was life-threatening and non-life-threatening, and life-threatening had to be taken care of in 24 hours. But the things that were life-threatening were things that you were pretty much in agreement with in terms of what they were, like a misaligned chimney flue, somebody could die of carbon monoxide poisoning. Yeah, EWAP, exposed wires, open panels, somebody could be shocked or electrocuted. Blocked egresses, a fire that night, we can't get out of bedroom window. Having fire extinguishers on a level 3 level was there, and there were others that weren't there, but they were considered to be severe, non-life-threatening. But under NSPIRE, you have some new ones that have come up for life-threatening. For instance, if you have an elderly property or the nursing home type property, you've got your nurse pull stations, your call for aid strings. Those things are going to become 24 hours. Now, I'm going to go off a little bit in a tangent, but bear with me because this is kind of an important concept. One of the things that the industry, again, working with FADA, I'm speaking of my experience with them, is that we need to be saying back to HUD that, hey, some things are resident caused and they're beyond our control. That exists in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It's a selection for the inspector to identify. Now, is the tenant causing damage for the landlord? Is it evident? We try to advocate for the resident as much as possible, but if the resident's damaging the property, the landlord's going to hold you accountable for it, and we're going to hold the resident accountable for it in the inspection. If you go into a unit and you tell the lady, the grandmother that babysits her grandchild, or she's got a cat, and she takes that string in the bathroom, she ties it up on the towel bar, and you say, listen, that is a lease violation. That's a 24-hour emergency item. I'm undoing this because if you fall on the floor and have a heart attack, you need to pull this. You need to be able to pull this. So you walk out the door, and what do? What happens? Same thing with the smoke detector. They take it back down, they tie it back up. So if you note this as a lease violation, then why should REACT come in and cite you on a 24-hour item like it's your problem that you're causing or not taking care of? You are. It's a resident issue and it should be noted as such. And such. But that's an eye opener, because those towel bar strings, when we do inspections, there's a lot of them, a lot of them. And the other part of that is egress, fire egress.
Yeah.
Fire egress, the one gentleman, I don't know if it was from Atlanta, because I don't know all you folks, I apologize for that, but was talking about, you know, you got an inspector that's doing a trained observation. I don't know what the fire code is locally when I walk in the door at your property. And I flew out to wherever I did from wherever I came from, you know, and I'm there for 3, 4, 5 hours assessing your property. So you having a fire marshal certification that they've inspected your property and it meets the requirements, I think that's what the REACT inspector should be looking at. I shouldn't be second guessing whether you're allowed to have bedroom windows with security bars or window air conditioners, and I only care about it up to the 3rd floor. But if I was in a fire, I certainly would jump out the window on the 4th floor. So there's some of these life-threatening things, and we got to look at them closely. You got the clothes dryer in here now. That means that bird's nest that's in the ductwork that we see outside, that constitutes a 24-hour item now. And actually, dryer fires are the #1 fires in houses. So, I mean, it's reasonable, but should it be 24 hours or 30 days? Like I said before, an exit sign having a bulb burned out, your foundation is showing rebar. Yeah, we had a condo collapse in Florida because they knew about it for years and years and years, and we had an underpinning washout of the foundation, and the building collapsed because it was in such a state of disrepair. But a foundation 24-hour, it's going to collapse in the next 24 hours. I don't know, that there's a lot of old properties in this housing market that have rebar sticking out of them in one place or another. So, I mean, everybody should look at the list and go through there. Gas leaks, you know, if they're indoors, I'd worry about them a lot. But, you know, I can go outside and walk past the bank of meters and smell gas leaking. Maybe it's coming out of the vent. Maybe it's coming out of a pipe joint. It needs to be further investigated by a higher level, more competent person. So life-threatening should be those things that have an immediate direct consequence, and everything else should have further investigation.
Thank you, Dennis. Persephone, I see you, and then I see Lillian.
Hi, this is Persephone from New York City Housing Authority. I don't have specific answers to the questions that are listed here, but generally our initial reaction to this is yes. We should have time extended beyond 24 hours for corrections of deficiencies. And something I want to note from our end in our initial conversations, because I'm sure this happens at other housing authorities, that when we're responding to damage created by, you know, Hurricane Sandy, for example, or I guess in other jurisdictions, other natural disasters, that creates a lot of situations where deficiencies are multiplied across multiple buildings, across multiple developments. And in this case, where we do have multi-year contracts in place in order to address the deficiencies, these are not going to get, you know, completed or addressed within 24 hours, right? If we have to fix 20 you know, rooftops, that's not going to be all done at the same time in the same year. And that, you know, has other factors in place, you know, funding and stuff like that. But in that case where we have shown the contracts to the REACT inspector and have also failed because the deficiencies are present by the time that they inspect, we have tried to appeal them with HUD. You know, even after demonstrated that we are in process of mitigating and addressing these deficiencies, not in the time frame that they want it or have it in, under their current standard. Our appeals were also denied. So, you know, we find it a bit difficult being in this situation because, you know, we have very old buildings in New York City, but also to the fact that, we anticipate that there might be other damages we get through natural disasters, but we are still currently addressing the ones from Hurricane Sandy, which happened in 10 years ago. So I wanted to put it that part for, I guess, specifically for our Section 9 buildings. But I see my colleague Lillian raising her hand. Perhaps she can add more to that aspect for Section 8.
Yeah, thank you, Persephone. It's very helpful.
Hi, Janelle. Sorry, I missed the earlier question. For NYCHA Section 8, we start the 24-hour clock when the violation is cited. So unfortunately, if it falls on a Friday, we do not send an inspector out because it's not normal business hours. However, during business hours, we do try to schedule a reinspection the next business day if possible. And NYCHA is also allowing for self-certification for 24 hours. So an owner has the ability to submit a certification if the repairs are made within that time frame.
Okay, thanks, Lillian. That's helpful to know. Okay, and I'm gonna put a request out to the group for this one because I think Dennis made a really great point here. If you all don't mind, after we're done with this meeting, if you can take a little bit of time looking at the ones on this list that would fall under life-threatening and send myself or Malcolm, and Malcolm, if you can drop our emails in the chat for me, feedback on specific ones that you think, and I was furiously taking notes, Dennis, where you were mentioning specific ones. But once you've had a chance to absorb what those 24-hour violations are, if you can give us in the checklist format and say, hey, this one really shouldn't be on the list. I think that would be really helpful feedback as well. But I don't want to take time, too much more time on this one because we're getting close to time. Actually, we're over time. I'm so sorry. We do have one more I'd like to just address quickly. If you all have maybe 10, 15 more minutes to hang on with me. For those of you that can't, I totally understand. We are recording the session and we can certainly share with you afterwards if you need to drop off. And I'm actually seeing my colleague, Malcolm, is being readmitted. So I'm not sure if he got dropped off. So anyway, Malcolm, if you can hear me, if you can put our emails in the chat for folks so that they can provide additional feedback on the 24-hour items. All right, so the last one that I wanted to talk about were heating requirements, and particularly in areas that have extreme weather. I think this one is really important to pay attention to. HUD's proposing to create 2 levels of severity for the minimum temperature deficiencies. They're saying that properties must be maintained at a minimum 64 degrees Fahrenheit, and this kind of goes back to our last slide and talking about the severe non-life-threatening deficiency for this one. They're proposing to identify this one as a potential where if their observed temperatures between 64 to 67.9 degrees, they will be identified as severe non-life-threatening. And my question here is, first of all, are these standards reasonable? Is an appropriate correction timeline? What is an appropriate correction timeline to say for things that are severe non-life-threatening? I think I heard 30 days being put out there as an option. Should HUD apply these requirements during specific months or climate zones? And what equipment would be required to measure home temperature? And so I'm going to pause there. I promise we're almost done. It's quite a bit of this notice. Any feedback on this one? Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some regional variance at play here, but I will just put in the chat New York City's like local standards for heating requirements. It is seasonal. So it applies October 1st through May 31st. And yeah, I think our recommendation would be to obviously to maintain the standard that we have at the city level, but just sharing, I think it relates not so much to the equipment requirement, but sort of, or the correction timeline, but just in terms of like what the specific thresholds work within New York City at least.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, the agencies I've worked at before, it was seasonal as well. Lillian, I think your hand's up, but I think that was probably for the last one.
Sorry, I will lower it.
You're fine. Any other feedback on this one? Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, Jack's point is extremely well taken. Is under the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Chapter 10 allowed you to adopt local codes and customs in terms of how you ran your program. Prince George's County, Maryland's, we do that Section 8 program for the inspections, and we have a similar temperature requirement during certain periods of the years, also window screens for that matter. But one of the things I just want to point out as a general comment, one of the things that is in this protocol that's a little scary is that HUD is actually making criteria that may supersede your local codes, customs of what you do. And that's kind of a scary thing. And I'll just bring up the GFI situation to begin with. In 1984, we started introducing GFIs in the electrical system in the kitchen sink area. Went to the bathrooms, went to other wet locations, and anything new, of course, is built to code. But we have a lot of older properties in this housing marketplace that may not have a GFI protected within 6 foot of the sink. And that's going off in a different way, but it just is another example of where HUD is may create criteria that's not the same as Jack's criteria, which creates a problem with him reconciling with his local codes and customs and others as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, any other feedback? And I'm just going to put it out there. We definitely welcome you. If you have additional staff that weren't able to join us in this call or some thoughts later on these different requirements, we definitely welcome you to email us after the fact. We have a little bit of time here. I'm going to move us on to the next steps to just kind of talk about where we're headed with this. I mentioned before, of course, public comment for this specific Federal Register is due on August 1st. There will be a series of additional rulemaking processes that are coming down the line, but for this one, in response to version 2.2 standards, are due on August 1st. So we will be, of course, sharing with this special group, and we were fairly targeted in who we invited to this. We definitely wanted to make sure we got some folks on the line that were in the demonstration, and also our committee members on both the tenant-based and place-based side to participate. So we will be putting out our draft comment letter to this specific group, and we'll be looking for you all to help us refine it. So please do not hesitate once we send that out to tell us if we got it wrong, if we need to continue adding additional things in, and we'll do our absolute best to get that to you all early enough so that we can provide you time to do that before August 1st. And Persephone, I heard you in your email to me about asking HUD for additional time. We will definitely put that out there. I'm not sure how much additional time we'll get on that one. We recently provided comments on the Build America, Buy America Act, and that, thank you. And that was very rushed. They only gave us 30 days for that one. We were able to squeak out 15 more days. So I'll put out the request and see where we get. But right now we will definitely make sure we're prepared to submit comments by August 1st if that does not happen. So what HUD is planning to do, we've talked about this a little bit. We've gotten notification from HUD specifically for public housing properties. They will be planning to implement NSPIRE in April 2023. The plan is October 2023 for multifamily properties, and they anticipate as early as April 2023 for HCB. So there seems to be wiggle room there for HCB, but I think we as an industry need to be pushing for more on both for all programs really, but definitely on the public housing and multifamily side before they are rolled out first. And with that, oh, I did put a timeline on this. Okay, so so you can email us any additional feedback, questions, light bulb moments that you have by Monday, July 25th. And I will do my absolute best to get a draft comment letter about by that point. No promises, but that's my plan. By email at jbeverly@clafa.org. Or you can submit it to my colleague, Malcolm Guy, and he's mguy@clafa.org. So with that, thank you all. I know this was a long session. I truly appreciate all the feedback that we've gotten. It's been very, very, very helpful. And we will look for more opportunities to have these type of sessions to get your voices heard when we're providing comments both to the Hill and to HUD. All right, that's all. I will let you all go. I'm 10 minutes over, so sorry for that. I usually try to keep us very close to the agenda, but hope you all have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Yeah, all right, thank you. And then again, if you would like a copy of the recording for this session, feel free to let me know, or I might actually just go ahead and send it out to the group once it's done uploading. All right, thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.